Hello everyone, welcome to my Sibelius tips for the year, I guess. It's been a year. I've got something interesting to show you today. It's not really related to Sibelius at all. It's more related to notation practice in general. And so let's get straight into it. Today we're going to talk about the rhythmic subdivision of the pulse, specifically in Sibelius. So if we have a look at this little score that I have here for you, you'll see all we have at the moment is a rhythm stave. Okay, so just a single line stave with some rhythms on it. That's because I don't want to, complicate things by having actual pitches in this video. I just want us to have simple rhythms. So as you can see, it looks a little funky. There's nothing particularly wrong with this, and the reason that it doesn't look right is because we've got some incorrect notational practices happening here. A general rule of speaking is that with any kind of notated music, in order to make it easier and clearer for the player, what we want to do is we want to have what we call an invisible bar line in the middle of every bar. And in some situations, we want to have invisible bar lines separating each beat of the bar out from each other. And the reason for this is it makes it easier to recognize groups of notes in terms of beats. Okay, so if you're counting along to your conductor, you can always kind of find where you are really easily because the notes are separated into beats of the bar, or at the very least halves of the bar. When we look at this piece of music, we can see that we've got here a half note obscuring the middle of the bar. Okay, the middle of the bar should be somewhere around here. Here in the second bar, we have a series of 8th notes and 16th notes that are again obscuring the middle of the bar. So I mean, we can't really see what's going on here. In addition, I mean, it's actually be easier to read if these kind of 8th notes and 16th notes were grouped by beats. Okay, that would make it easier to read. Same again here, we've got this particular, 8th note is obscuring the beat, and then you've got this half note again obscuring the middle of the bar. So, I mean, in Sibelius, there's only really one way to do it, and that's to use your brain, okay? There's no shortcuts for this in Sibelius. This is the one thing that separates, I guess, amateur scores from professional-looking scores, is because Sibelius does not do rhythmic subdivision of the pulse for you. So you have to do it for yourself, all right? So, I mean, the first thing that I'm going to do is this half note. I've got to get rid of it. I just have to get rid of it. So I've got to think, okay, cool, let me change the value of this half note. And my main goal is so that I can see firstly the middle of the bar line. So here, if I change that half note into a quarter note, I can see actually that there's 2 8th notes left. So that's a quarter note really. Okay, but the half of the bar falls in between the 8th notes. So I've got one of two options really. I could theoretically, and this is not incorrect, I could change those middle 2 8th notes into a quarter note. Because in terms of rhythmic subdivision of the pulse, we want to see the middle of the bar unless the bar is symmetrical, in which case it can be obscured. My preference, however, is to tie over the middle of the bar so that we can see it. So I would change, in this instance, I would change this quarter note into a dotted quarter note, and I would tie it to an 8th note. Okay, for me that is infinitely more readable than the example we had before. In this second bar, this for me is just a nightmare from hell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count out, okay, there's one beat there, those 2 8th notes are one beat there, there's a half a beat, there's a quarter of a beat, I need another quarter of a beat. So I'm going to change that into a 16th note. And now I can see the middle of my bar. So if I change that into a 16th note and tie those over, suddenly that makes a whole lot more sense. But for me, in this bar, I really actually want to see each beat because we've got 16th notes. So, I mean, probably here is the middle of the first half of the bar. Okay, so here's the quarter mark of the bar. Right here. So I'm going to change that into a 16th too, and I'm going to tie that over. Okay, and all of a sudden we have something that looks a lot more readable. So moving on to the third bar, same deal again. I want to get rid of this 8th note that is obscuring my first beat. by turning it into a 16th note. Then I'm going to put another 8th note in, another 16th note in, and tie it over. For me, that's still not sufficient though, because then I can't see the middle of my bar. So I'm going to have to finish off my second beat grouping, okay, by adding a 16th note. And I'm going to have to tie that over the halfway line in the bar, okay. And now I've got a quarter note, an 8th note, and a 16th note, okay. So for those of you who don't know, actually, that's going to be a double dotted quarter note. Dotted quarter note is you take the value of the note, which is a quarter, you halve it, which is an 1/8, and you add it on. And then a double dotted note, any double dotted note, you take the value of the note, you halve it, okay, you add it to the note, and then you take that halved value, halve that, and add it to the note. Okay, so in this case, half of a quarter note is an 8th note, and half of an 8th note is a 16th note. So so a double dotted quarter note would equal 1/4, 1/8, and 1/16. Okay, so where you find that in Sibelius in your keypad is in the second tab. Okay, down the bottom, double dot. Okay, so click that, and then I can put my note in. Okay, and there I've subdivided my beats quite nicely. Admittedly, this double dot obscures the third beat in the bar, but if I was to not double dot that, I would have to have multiple ties, which again becomes confusing, because then I would have to have, for example, a dotted 8th note, okay, and tie that to my already tied quarter note. So it becomes messy, okay? So it's much neater and tidier to actually just double dot that note. And finally, I have here the dotted half note that I have to worry about. So when I think about it, this last bit at the end is actually, that's an 8th and a 16th, so I'm missing a 16th to make my fourth beat. And here I've got a 16th on my first beat, so I'm missing 3/16 of my first beat. So I like to think about it like that. Okay, and then be like, okay, what do I have to do in order to see the middle of the bar? Well, if I take double dotted quarter note tied to a quarter note, and unfortunately I'm going to have to tie that to the 16th note as well. All right. That's as clear as I can get that particular rhythm. And there you go. Now we can see the halfway point of all of our bars, which makes it a lot easier to read. Coincidentally, just as a little bonus, in Sibelius, if you ever need to separate out your beams, often you need to do this when you're doing kind of rhythmic subdivision of the pulse. In your keypad, there's these little commands here. These help you separate out your beams, okay, or tie beams together, really. Okay, because Sibelius tends to, if you just keep going, it just beams everything together. But really, we should only be beaming one beat only. Okay, so all of the subdivisions of one beat, that should be beamed. We don't want to really beam more than that. So anyway, end beam, middle beam, start beam. There's some options there for you to beam or stop beaming your notes in Sibelius. So there you go, there's your little example of rhythmic subdivision of the pulse in Sibelius. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, just let me know. I'm not very good at answering them, but I'll try. And if you have any ideas for anything else you want to have a video for, let me know. Just as an aside, I highly recommend Mark McGrain's music notation book. It's published by Berkeley Press. It's where I learned everything, and I mean everything about notation. You can buy it off bookdepository.com or Amazon. I think it's pretty much available anywhere. So that's my recommendation to you. Mark McGrain's music notation. And that's me. I will see you guys next time.